Good morning, everybody. This is Joe Wolverton with the New American Review. We did not light it, but we are going to fan the flames this morning. We've got some really great guests. We are going to talk to Senator Lee Bright this morning. Senator Bright is a senator from South Carolina who's challenging Lindsey Graham for the Senate seat in South Carolina. We've got Alex Newman, the foreign correspondent of the New American, going to talk a little Obamacare and a little Syria. Tone of the show, just so you know, is we believe here that we've got more to fear from the extremists in Washington than the extremists in Waziristan, that our liberty is threatened more by the terrorists on the Potomac than the terrorists in Pakistan. We got to keep ourselves free. It's up to us to do it. We have more to fear from domestic terrorists that live in Washington, D.C. than anything else. And I believe the people we talk to will agree with that. And we will start off the morning, like I say, talking to Senator Lee Bright, who is challenging Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham, of course, lately calling for not only military strikes in Syria, but military strikes in Iran as well. I don't think his hands ever get tired of beating the war drums. He must have calluses upon calluses. The guy's constantly at the war drum and supporting everything, all the growth in government put forth by President Obama. Lindsey Graham is back there tapping his foot saying, yes, sir, yes, sir. We've got the South Carolina Tea Party. They presented some, sort of like, how Martin Luther nailed his theses to the door of the church. You've got the South Carolina Tea Party doing the same thing for Lindsey Graham, nailing up the things that he's guilty of in the Senate. Of course, famously, Lindsey Graham famous for sit down, shut up, you don't get a lawyer. His one-man refutation of the Fifth and Sixth Amendments. Of course, he voted to arm terrorists in Syria because the leadership of Al-Qaeda, of course, is associated with the leadership of the Syrian so-called resistance. He approves of the NSA's continuing surveillance of millions of Americans. He has famously opposed Rand Paul's call to promise to not use drones on American citizens. Of course, he believes that should be an option. Sending aid to Egypt, it's constantly calling for everything that the applicable laws of the United States prevent us from doing, but he's wanting to do it. Supporting the surrender of U.S. sovereignty to the United Nations, sending billions to governments worldwide. Look, there's not a word in the Constitution that allows us to send one red cent to anyone, anywhere. Yet we've got Senator Graham voting to send billions, not only to just random countries, but to resistance forces within those countries whose leadership is rife with Al-Qaeda, the declared enemy in the war on terror. We've got the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, that makes one liable for indefinite detention in a military prison for providing substantial aid to Al-Qaeda. And then you've got Lindsey Graham and Barack Obama sending them money and arms. Why are they not being indefinitely detained? So what is the law for us is not the law for people like Lindsey Graham and Barack Obama. And we've got Senator Lee Bright that will be joining us, and he's challenging Lindsey Graham in South Carolina. We're happy to have him for sure. Are you there, Senator Bright?
I'm here.
Good to have you this morning, Senator. Thank you for joining us so much here on the New American Radio.
Great to be here.
Yes, sir. So, I've talked to you a lot. Give the listeners and the viewers here, give us a little bit of the elevator biography that you would give for yourself and your campaign there in South Carolina.
Well, I spent 5 years on the state senate trying to push back against the federal government. And in the past year, especially, we've had our senior senator from South Carolina actually assisting Barack Obama in his agenda, while all the time we're down here trying to fight against it in South Carolina. So we believe it's time to send somebody up to Washington that will push against the federal government.
Well, we agree with you, and we think you're the man to do it. And I can tell viewers and listeners that I have followed you for some time, just covering your your attempts, as you say, to push back against the federal government there in South Carolina. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the bills that you sponsored and authored there in the Palmetto State to push back against Barack Obama?
Well, the nullification bill on Obamacare, we've actually passed the House, and we're going to do battle on it in the Senate. Also, constitutional carry. And I don't feel like it's I don't know how a person can read the Second Amendment and then believe that you have to go to your state government to get a permit.
Well, absolutely. Turning something that's a right into a privilege is a step away from the Constitution, a step away from the Founding Fathers. Tell us a little bit, Senator Bright, about specifically what it is that Lindsey Graham is doing in Washington that makes him a candidate for being unseated.
Well, up until this point, he's not been very outspoken on pushing back against Obamacare. He has been basically assisting McCain and Obama, and I believe they've become community organizers for the Muslim Brotherhood over in the Middle East, whether it be Egypt or Syria. You know, they have gone over there and really picked sides in a basically a civil war when there is no good side. And it doesn't make sense to me that they just seem to want to embolden a group that has ties to Al-Qaeda.
Absolutely, and that's one of the biggest things that I have a problem with, and I think our listeners have a problem with, and viewers, is that, you know, Lindsey Graham was one of the big pushers for the National Defense Authorization Act, calling for the indefinite detention of Americans who they believe support Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, or associated forces. And then you've got Lindsey Graham and Barack Obama sending those people not only millions of dollars, but you've got them sending weapons and now making the United States military their personal air force. I don't see how he's not locked up indefinitely for his support of Al-Qaeda.
Well, you know, it's amazing that they want to take the weapons away from citizens who have the rights to carry them here in this country, but yet they want to give weapons to folks that have chose to put them in the past.
You know, and maybe there's a lesson to be learned in Senator Graham and Barack Obama's push to take weapons away from Americans and give them to Al-Qaeda. I mean, we may have to learn something there. It may be that they recognize that those weapons, that the purpose for which those weapons are being used in Syria might someday be the purpose for which they were used in the United States, and they want to prevent that.
Well, I'll never forget and he was obviously citing Supreme Court rulings, but he made the comment in a committee hearing that the Second Amendment was for reasonable men for reasonable purposes. And I would argue that King George did not think the colonials were being reasonable.
Absolutely. And, well, you know, one thing you have to remember talking about the Second Amendment, you know, you've got the UN, the Arms Trade Treaty, that's calling for the setting ceilings on ammunition. You've got to realize, speaking of King George, the British troops were coming for the ammunition when the shot heard around the world was fired in Lexington. We will be back in just a few seconds with Senator Lee Bright, constitutionalist challenger to Lindsey Graham in the Senate. Please stay tuned. Call in with your calls, 1-800-776-1913. And there we are. Are you still there, Senator?
I'm here.
All right, we'll be back with you just after the break.
All right, good deal.
Thank you. We are still on YouTube, as I understand. Is that right, Clark? Yes, sir. We are live broadcasting on YouTube. So the radio, we get hard breaks because there's commercials and whatnot. But on YouTube, we own the airwaves, so to speak, and we can continue broadcasting right through the break. So we appreciate having Senator Bright on here. Of course, he's someone that's making national news pretty much every day for the strides he's making in catching up to Lindsey Graham. Of course, we know Lindsey Graham has millions in the bank and thinks he can buy the election, but we've got Lee Bright, who like I say, I've been covering for a while, and I think he is the real deal. And I think that, you know, something that you need to remember is these are the days when We can't allow constitutionalist challengers to the establishment to just make their own way and hope they win. We've got to get behind these people. So please, listeners, viewers, well, right now, just viewers, go to Bright4, that's F-O-R, Senate.com. Give a little bit to Senator Lee Bright. Whatever you can afford to give to help him out. We've got to get him in there so that we can get a shift in the Senate away from Lindsey Graham and John McCain and toward Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, Mike Lee, and let's add Lee Bright's name to that. And I think we can do that if we just donate a little bit, bright4senate.com. And I think, like I say, the days are gone when we can just rely on South Carolina to elect South Carolina senators. We got to all get behind constitutionalist challengers to the establishment, to where one by one we pick these guys off. Talking about Lindsey Graham, talking to you at Graham Blog, talking to you at Senator John McCain. We get these guys gone, get some real constitutionalists in there, return this country to where we want it to be, country of freedom, where we don't get involved, where we don't need to get involved.
Well, keep in mind, $45 was the average donation of Ted Cruz.
Right. Welcome back to New American Radio. We are on the phone with Senator Lee Bright from South Carolina, who is a constitutionalist challenger to Senator Lindsey Graham. And something you just said, Senator, that now that we're back on the radio, I'd like you to repeat. Tell the story that you told me regarding donations and how even a guy without deep pockets, a guy like myself, can help someone like you, someone who I believe in, someone who I know will be true to their oath of office to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. Tell us how we can go about helping you, and tell us a story about Ted Cruz's victory.
Well, bright4senate.com, F-O-R, senate.com is the website. And my understanding is the average donation for Ted Cruz was $45. So, the key to think about this is there's more of us than there are of them. And when I say them, I'm talking about the Washington establishment, Democrat and Republicans. Let's just remember, less than a month ago, on just shy of September 11th, Jeb Bush gave an award to Hillary Clinton.
And that's absolutely
for being a friend of liberty.
Right. And if anybody who believes...
It is really an us versus them. It's the Washington establishment against the rest of us. There are more of us than there are of them.
Absolutely. You've got, people know we have two parties. Many of them seem to think the party is Republican and Democrat. The two parties are the party of liberty and the party of the establishment. And the party of the establishment is one by one picking off our God-given rights, assigning them to the government and saying the government has the right to give and take away. And fortunately, we have people like you, people like Rand Paul, people like Ted Cruz and Mike Lee in the Senate who realize that rights are a gift of God and only He can take and give away, and that we've got the Constitution that protects those rights. Tell me a little bit about, Senator Bright, a little bit about your opinion of the 16th Amendment.
Well, we've got to basically, and this goes to the gray argument of the entire Bill of Rights. When you go through the first 10, these are not being enforced. I mean, the Bill of Rights are not being enforced, but yet you've got an IRS that's violating the rights, and they use the income tax in order to do it. And we just need to repeal the income tax. I've got no qualm about it. I mean, it is a burden, it's tyranny, and it's how they control us.
Absolutely. And, you've got the fact that the IRS not only use themselves as a political tool of the establishment. You've got, for example, Christine O'Donnell. Now, I don't want to get into her politics. I don't want to talk about that necessarily. But the fact that you've got government agents using the IRS information to hold it over the head to blackmail political foes of the establishment. And so we have definitely got to get rid of the IRS. It is draining the economy.
We've got to repeal the 16th Amendment. We've got to take the fight to them. And I have studied it, and I believe the fair tax is the way to go because that takes the power out of Washington. Explain
a little bit about your support for that. What is the fair tax?
The fair tax is a cross-the-board percentage on new goods, and it gets rid of the income tax. It gets rid of basically the tax code that hampers businesses when it comes to your payroll taxes and all the other taxes that, complicate business. You think about the money that's spent every year in complying to the tax code. It's a drain on the economy. So if you had a fair tax, you would capture the underground economy. And there's a tremendous amount of money being made in this country that's not taxed.
That's absolutely right. Well, here's it's
a fair and equitable system, I believe.
Well, and here's a revolutionary idea. Let's go ahead and interpret the Constitution as it's written. The Constitution as it's written specifically forbids an income tax. There is no other way around it. Now, you can have the Supreme Court getting involved and saying that what the meaning of the word is, but the Constitution explicitly forbids an income tax, but yet we continue doing it. Let me ask you a question. Speaking of money, what about the Federal Reserve? Let the people know what's your take on the Federal Reserve and the calls to audit the Federal Reserve.
Oh, I'm 100% behind auditing it. I believe that our debt's being monetized and it's punishing the savers. It's punishing our seniors. And what concerns me is when I talk to seniors around the state, they're awful worried about Social Security because it seems to be the thing they've always used to scare us. But they have never, or scare seniors rather, but they don't really look at the monetization of the debt, which is what's really destroying them.
Absolutely.
And that's what they need to be looking at closely. I mean, it is an absolute, it's horrifying to think of the quantitative easing, and people seem to think, well, the stock market's doing better, but all they're doing is devaluing our currency.
Well, and it's manufactured. I mean, we have a private corporation handing out IOUs and expecting us to use those as money, and we've been doing it now for 100 years, and it doesn't seem like there's enough push to really have someone pull the curtain back on the wizard and see who's pulling the levers back there. And I think if we could get Lee Bright in there, Senator, just to tell you what I really think, if we could get you in there, get Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, Mike Lee, get a couple other guys around the country of y'all's ilk, and get you in there to the Senate, I think we would have the political capital to spend, so to speak, to pull the curtain back and see what's going on in the Federal Reserve, and to audit that thing and abolish it if necessary. I really do think it's time for those who love liberty, those who are concerned about the Constitution and the fact that it's being disregarded and considered irrelevant by both parties, by the leadership on the Republican side and the leadership on the Democratic side. Both of these parties are destroying the Constitution, and I think it's time to get people like you. And like you say, look, give a little bit, bright4senate.com. Yes, I'm going to keep repeating it because Senator Bright, Lee Bright, is the real deal, and he can challenge Lindsey Graham.
And keep in mind on this Federal Reserve issue, what a lot of people don't realize is they keep talking about the printing presses. This money's not even backed by paper. It's digitized. It's not even printed. I mean, people don't realize exactly what's going on. All they're doing is hitting digits on a computer screen, and the money appears out of thin air, and it's not even printed.
And these are the same people that were too big to fail. They get these bailouts, these giant bailouts from the taxpayer, and then they continue holding the taxpayer's financial stability hostage by, like you say, these virtual money that exists nowhere but on some computer and in the mind of those who would control the economy of the United States. And again, let's just go to the Constitution. Go to the four corners of that document. There is no way that our currency should be controlled by a private corporation. Let me ask you one last thing here, Senator. Foreign policy, since if you were in the Senate, when you get into the Senate, on the day you're sworn in, we will be looking to you, those of us who care about the Constitution, who are civil libertarians and as Ron Paul calls, non-interventionists. I would ask you, what's your take on the sending of troops into combat worldwide? What would be your standard for pushing that little button and voting to send American troops overseas?
Well, we have really got our foreign policies in a shambles, and we have a president who is obsessed with promoting the Muslim Brotherhood. But yet you've got Russia, who's violated our airspace twice recently, once in Alaska, once in California. They have sent nuclear attack subs off our coast in Florida, Louisiana, and Texas, Or actually, the subs to seek out our subs is what they are. But it's amazing how provocative they're being because we're perceived as weak around the world. And we're weak because we're so thin. And we're getting involved as policemen of the world in every single conflict around the globe.
So a Senator Lee Bright would not be voting to send our troops into Syria. Is that right?
Absolutely not. I mean, the Middle East is a problem that Jimmy Carter delved into, and it's continually gotten worse with Republican and Democrats in the White House. Let's let them govern what goes on within their borders, and let's govern what goes on within ours and protect our borders. Absolutely.
Well, Senator Lee Bright from South Carolina, he is challenging Lindsey Graham. We need Lee Bright in the Senate. Please, people, if you care about seeing these people, if you're really serious, put your money where your mouth is. Just a little bit, every little bit helps. Am I right, Senator?
Amen. Like I said, $45 was the average donation, and that got you Ted Cruz. So
just remember,
some
that's
people
right.
can't do 45. Some people can, some people can do $5. Some people can do, to 2,600. But whatever you can do, please do.
Well, let's give the New American bump to Senator Lee Bright. Go to Bright4 Senate.com and help out a real constitutionalist. Get rid of a real keystone of the establishment and return this country to its constitutional foundations. Senator Bright, thank you so much for joining us this morning from South Carolina.
Thanks for having me.
All right, sir. God bless you.
Bye-bye. Same to you. Bye-bye.
All right. That was Lee Bright from South Carolina. Boy, I get fired up talking to him. He is a guy that is the real deal. I've talked to him. I've interviewed him, written about him for years. He is the real deal. He is a nullifier. He is someone who is a firebrand. He will push back against the establishment in the Senate. He will walk right up and join the block of senators with Rand Paul and Mike Lee and Ted Cruz. He'll be another one. Bright4Senate.com. We have a caller on the air. Rumel?
Hey, Joe. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Where are you calling from?
Las Vegas.
Lost Wages, Nevada. Excellent. Go ahead, sir.
Hey, I had a question regarding some of your earlier statements about the states standing up to Washington and refusing to take the federal money.
Right.
I was wondering, what kind of steps can the states take, and what can we do as ordinary citizens to facilitate these changes?
Well, I think that's a great question, and one of my favorite questions, of course, and I'm grateful that you called in from Las Vegas this morning. The first thing we need to do as citizens is seek out and elect state legislators that are determined to hold as null, void, and of no legal effect any act of the federal government that exceeds its constitutional powers. We got to have guys who will go to the steps of the state capitol and rip up the checks, because the fact is, right now, there is not a single state that's walking up to that line, the constitutional line, and holding the federal government accountable, because the checks are coming in from the federal government, and those people don't want to stand up and say, well, sorry, you're not going to get your benefits this month because we've decided to uphold the Constitution. So I think the first step, and the most important step, is elect state legislators who have a backbone, will stand up to the federal government, will get on the steps of the Capitol, and rip the checks up when they come in from Washington. That'll be the first step. Thank you very much. We had Ramel from Las Vegas talking to us. Thank you so much for your call. We had Senator Lee Bright. We'll be back after the break. Thank you. And we are still on the YouTube. I call it the YouTube to prove that I'm old. Well, that was a great interview with Lee Bright. That is a guy who is legit. So many times we've got these candidates who want to take money from constitutionalists and civil libertarians and conservatives who want to take money from everyone and claim to be the real deal and are not the real deal. They get in Washington, they get what I call Potomac fever. It gets all up in their head. They forget the promises they made in the campaign. They forget the Constitution, and they start looking at, wow, General Dynamics can offer me that kind of job. Lockheed can offer me that kind of job if I just stick around here and vote to expand the wars and sell their wares worldwide. You got to think about that. That's intoxicating for a lot of people. Lee Bright is not one of those people, and I'm so happy. And on that topic, let me just say, look around. Go to thenewamerican.com. Thenewamerican.com. That's where I write. That's where our next guest, Alex Newman, that's where he writes. And we've got articles there that follow the several candidates nationwide who are running against establishment candidates, where we can fight against the power all over the United States. Because, like I said, the time is gone where we can just elect those people from our state. We need to spread it around, find those people nationwide who are voting, who we know we can rely on to be good constitutionalists and can take this country back. That's in the House and the Senate, but don't neglect your state House and state Senate as well. And someone asked me yesterday, they said, well, what can I do as an individual if there's no one running, who fits the bill, the constitutional bill? Well, run yourself. Come on. There'll be people that can get behind you. There's no doubt about that. And we need to do that. We need to take this country back, and the power is in the people. We're sitting here upholding Barack Obama, upholding Lindsey Graham, upholding John McCain. When the power is in our hands, we are not our Father's children if we do not throw off the chains of tyranny the way they did. And the number one way is to get back to the Constitution. Quit pussyfooting around stuff, and let's call it like we see it. And let's say Barack Obama is breaking the law. Every senator and every congressman who votes to send money to Syria is breaking the law. Israel is not a client state of the United States. There is not a single word in the Constitution that provides for us to send money to anyone, much less print it with some private corporation. We are back at KHQN here, the mouth of Rock Canyon, Provo, Utah. I am Joe Wolverton. We're here with the New American Review. We have Alex Newman on the phone. Alex Newman of thenewamerican.com. He is the foreign correspondent, generally based in Europe, covering all things European and all things global for the New American magazine. This is a guy who I consider not only a friend, but a guy who I look up to for his hard-nosed journalistic style, and love reading his stuff on the New American. And we're going to talk to him a little bit this morning about some of the things that he knows about better than any of us. Can give us the warning voice. Alex, are you there?
I am. Thanks for the nice introduction, Joe.
Oh, yes, sir. Alex Newman. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Alex. Let readers and viewers and listeners know a little bit about yourself and what you focus on at the New American.
Yeah, basically I'm the foreign correspondent, like you said. I've lived all over the world. I guess that's why maybe the job kind of fell to me by default. I grew up mostly in Latin America and in Europe, and spent some time in Africa, and have traveled pretty extensively. And yeah, most of the time I'm based in Europe. I'm in the United States right now for a little while, and I'll be here for a little bit and then head back to Europe. And yeah, I pretty much just cover, like you said, foreign issues for the New American. I do some domestic stuff from time to time, but I try to stick to international things, the global economy, what different countries are doing, what's going on within them, the elections, and especially places where the United States government is involved in all these foreign wars and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. Speaking of that, a couple of things that you've done that have brought you, of course, national acclaim, and rightly so, is your coverage of the Rio 20 conference with regard to Agenda 21 and your coverage of Syria. Tell us a little bit about what you discovered when you were down in Brazil covering the Rio 20 conference. What is it that struck you as most surprising, that most Americans, I think, would be a surprise to learn about regarding Agenda 21?
See, I already knew Agenda 21 was a bad deal when I went down to Rio. It was clear from the documents that the UN was publishing that they were trying to use this sustainability issue to create a kind of all-powerful world government. They made that very clear in their documents, and I covered a lot of this stuff up to the moment before heading to Rio. But then when I got there, it was just like a slap in the face. It's almost hard to describe. I wish I could take the American people and walk them through this conference and show them the signs and show them the posters, because I honestly believe that if Americans knew really what was going on there, they would be shocked and appalled. I think, just walking through that conference hall in Rio, people would say, let's get out of the United Nations. They have posters. One of the ones that I wrote about, because it struck me as one of the most in-your-face, direct examples of what they're talking about, was a poster. It was the Earth, and it was sick. So it had like a thermometer coming out of its mouth. And then the doctor says, oh, you have some problems. Let me see. Oh, your diagnosis. You have humans. So I think that poster really summed up the UN's attitude to humanity. Humans are a disease that needs to be remedied. And that's preposterous. I mean, anybody who believes the Bible, anybody who even just has basic common sense knows that humans are not a disease for the planet. That's just preposterous. But the way that the UN is looking at this is that humans are a disease, that our economic production is bad. And they talk about this openly in their documents, and they were talking about it the whole time at the conference. We need to slow down the economy. We can't have all this prosperity. People are emitting too much CO2. And they've really jumped on this bandwagon that carbon dioxide is pollution. And the EPA on Friday announced its new pollution carbon dioxide decrees. And to accept that carbon dioxide is pollution is to really say that up is down and down is up. It's madness. Every time a person takes a breath, they exhale CO2.
Yeah,
so for the United Nations. Go ahead.
No, I'm no doctor, and I don't even play one on TV, but I think, as I recall from fifth grade health, do we not exhale carbon dioxide?
That's exactly right. So they're essentially saying that every time you take a breath, you're emitting pollution. Now,
Alex, I will have to say this. I would be very much in favor of some sort of plan to have everyone in Washington hold their breath for the next 5 minutes.
Oh, my goodness. Wouldn't that be a blessing, right? And at the UN, too.
There you go. On Turtle Bay and on the Potomac, all of y'all just start holding your breath right now for 5 minutes. And you talk about a breath of fresh air after that. Holy cow. Liberty from sea to shining sea. Let me ask you a quick question, Alex, about Obamacare. Now, you wrote, and let me tell you guys something seriously. If you want to get the straight dope, so to speak, if you want to get the information on Obamacare, Syria, the United Nations Agenda 21, Alex is the guy to do it. Go to thenewamerican.com. Follow Alex. Alex, are you on Twitter or Facebook or anything, by the way?
I am on Facebook, and I love friend requests. So if anybody wants to add me on there, please go ahead. I'm not on Twitter yet, but a lot of people say I should be.
Yeah,
so
I'm one of those who say you should be. So, Obamacare. Let's talk for just a minute about this, because you've got an article that was put up last week. Poll: most Americans support federal shutdown to defund Obamacare. Now, I know that the House of Representatives have voted to do this, and everyone says the Senate will never do it, that they don't have the political will to do it. Tell us a little bit what we're talking about, Alex. What are we talking about when we talk about defunding Obamacare, shutting the federal government down? What's the status of this push?
Well, the House leadership, the Republican leadership in the House of Representatives, tried to pull a fast one here. They tried to separate the two issues so that they could get away with funding Obamacare while pretending to be against Obamacare. Mm-hmm. But as anyone who's read the Constitution knows, all bills spending money or taxing, they have to come from the House of Representatives. So the House has the power to kill Obamacare now. All they have to do is say not one more penny for Obamacare. And it's like this with all the issues. They like to pretend that nobody knows this, but they talk about we shouldn't be funding Planned Parenthood. Well, the Republicans are in control of the House. Stop funding it.
There you
so
go.
What's going on with
yeah, and I'm with you 100%. I mean, I am so over these politicians standing up and with their left fist shaking it at the heavens and decrying Obamacare and everything else, and in their right hand signing the checks. What is going on?
That's right.
The House of Representatives has the power. Read the Constitution. Of course, they don't want people reading the Constitution because then all their jobs are in trouble and their future employment with Lockheed's in trouble. But, like I say, I'm tired of the fist shaking with the left hand and signing the checks with the right hand. So, Obamacare, the House of Representatives have the power. Sorry to interrupt you. That fires me up when you say that, and it just reminds me, what is the deal? You've got people who sit there and say we're so against it, and yet they keep writing the checks. So that's where we're at with the Republicans right now. They all claim to be against it, but they were trying to pull a fast one, as you say. So what's the status now? Where are we at with the defunding of Obamacare vis-a-vis the shutdown of the federal government?
Okay, so basically, I think Boehner kind of maybe overestimated the stupidity or the ignorance of the American people, because when he tried this to pull a fast one, he got called on it. A lot of conservative organizations all across the country, a lot of them with a lot of clout. There was just an uproar. The phones were ringing off the hook in Boehner's office and Cantor's office. So people caught on, and eventually we succeeded. So the House Republicans did pass a budget that does not include funding for Obamacare. So that really is the final deal here. Now it's Obama who's threatening to shut down the government. He's trying to blame it on the Republicans and say that it's the House Republicans' fault, but really he's the one who's going to have to veto this budget, and he's the one who's going to be shutting down the government. But that's essentially where the battle lines are drawn here. The House now has passed a budget that does not fund Obamacare. If it reaches Obama's desk, he's going to veto it, he says, and the Senate apparently is not even going to pass it because there's a lot of Republican senators who are refusing to go along with this. The Republican establishment, it might as well be the Democrats. They are lining up against this effort. Even on the TV shows, and a lot of the big prominent establishment Republicans like Karl Rove are saying, no, this is a bad idea, blah, blah, blah. So it's easy to see that we have basically a political establishment, one party, whether they have an R or a D next to their name, and then the grassroots. The grassroots do not want Obamacare. As this poll that I wrote about shows, 51% of the people support, and this was a scientific poll. They talked to 1,000 likely voters, Republicans and Democrats, and across the board, people want huge spending cuts. People want Obamacare defunded. But if you watch TV, you wouldn't know it. They keep saying, oh, it's going to be a disaster to have the government shut down, and it's going to be all the Republicans' fault. So that's basically where we are right now.
Well, and can you, Alex, tell me, short of abolishing the Federal Reserve, can you think of any bigger boost to liberty than shutting down the federal government?
That's exactly right. I almost think like they're shooting themselves in the foot here, because a lot of people, have become dependent on the federal government. But imagine what a great place this could be if the federal government was shut down for a while. The bureaucrats go home. It would just be, in so many respects, the economy would start soaring. So, I mean, we could call their bluff on this. Let the federal government shut down and we see how great everything works. But the problem is, the federal government has gotten a lot of people dependent on it with the Social Security checks and the Medicare and the Medicaid and all these different welfare programs that they're running. So there is a sizable constituency that would say, hey, I need my money. But overall, I think shutting down the government would be a wonderful blessing for this country. Let
me ask you a quick question. We've got another topic. We've got a question just sent into the show. Steve from Idaho wants to know the rebels in Syria. What's their connection to Al Qaeda, and what's the deal with chemical weapons? Is the federal government right in saying that we have intelligence that proves beyond a reasonable doubt that it was the rebels in Syria that used the the government in Syria that used the chemical weapons rather than the rebels? And what's the deal with that and our support for the resistance, so-called, in Syria?
Well, actually, I have an article coming up in an upcoming print version of the New American, exactly about the Syrian rebels, looking at the different rebel groups, the Al-Qaeda affiliated groups, and the supposedly moderate Free Syrian Army that everybody wants to support and that we really are supporting behind the scenes. So to break down the rebel groups,
Alex, hold on for just 1 second. We got a hard break on the radio, but stay with us. We'll be on YouTube. Here we go. All right, Alex, keep going.
The rebel groups, essentially they're all Islamic radicals to some degree or another. There might be, some good people fighting in the rebellion. I don't doubt that. But by and large, you have kind of two factions of the rebel groups. On the one side, you have the Al-Qaeda groups that are openly Al-Qaeda. They declared their allegiance to Al-Qaeda and to its purported leader, al-Zawahiri, Al-Qaeda in Iraq. And then on the other side, you have the supposedly moderate rebels, right? At least the U.S. government, the Obama administration, and people like John McCain keep calling moderate rebels. But if you look closely at what this Free Syrian Army is, and you really won't find two people who have the same thing to say about the Free Syrian Army. It's kind of a whack-a-mole thing. As soon as you figure out what it is, it becomes something else. But in a nutshell, it's an umbrella group that claims to have battalions and units all over Syria under its command. I don't know that they're really under the FSA command, but it's an umbrella group that's receiving a lot of aid from foreign governments, ours included, especially Arab dictatorships, the Gulf dictatorships there that happen to be Sunni Muslim, like the Qataris and the Saudi Arabians and the Kuwaitis and so on. So they're all supporting this Free Syrian Army, the supposed moderates. And if you look at this FSA, first of all, what you find is they've perpetrated a lot of atrocities, or at least people fighting under the FSA banner have perpetrated all sorts of monstrous atrocities, murdering Christians, war crimes, everything you can imagine. And then on the other side, you have the people who are openly saying that they're Al-Qaeda. And it's hard to tell the difference between the two. So, would it be better for Assad to stay, or would it be better for the rebels to take over? That's a hard call. Assad...
All right. Hold on just one second there, Alex. We are back on KHQN on the New American Review. I'm Joe Wolverton, your host. We are talking this morning for a few more minutes here to Alex Newman of the New American. If you don't read Alex's stuff, you need to. Alex writes about a lot of things really well. We were talking before the break, Alex, about Syria. We continue talking on YouTube through the broadcast, which is nationwide. KHQN 1480 AM radio is the channel on YouTube. Dial it up on the YouTube machine. Watch us every Monday morning. We're going to continue to have guests, nationally prominent guests, who can fill us in on the front lines, what's going on, the dispatches from the front lines for the fight for freedom. Alex, about Syria. Now, what about the chemical weapons? What's the true story there? We've got, of course, the establishment in Washington saying the Assad government is using chemical weapons to kill the babies. And then you've got other people who say it was the Free Syrian Army using the chemical weapons to kill the babies. Who's killing the babies in Syria?
That's a really good question. At this point, I think anything the Obama administration says should not be taken seriously. It's clear now after many years that the Obama administration is not credible on anything. So is it possible that Assad used the chemical weapons? I think it is. But I think it's more likely that the rebels used the chemical weapons. Now, I don't know that for sure, but there's been a lot of evidence to indicate that. The rebels have been caught using chemical weapons in the past. They've been caught with chemical weapons. A group of them were arrested in Turkey with sarin gas. So there's no question that the rebels could produce and have used chemical weapons. And now, there's also no question. Go ahead.
Well, no, and let's not forget, and this is something that I want people to focus on, is the fact that by arming the rebels, don't care who they are under this giant umbrella of the so-called Syrian resistance, by sending them money, by sending them weapons, Barack Obama and every senator and every congressman who votes to send them money and weapons has violated the National Defense Authorization Act, Section 1021, Section 1039, violated because they are providing substantial support to Al-Qaeda and associated groups. That's the word, associated forces. There is no question that the Syrian resistance is associated with Al-Qaeda. No, you can't say it's a branch of Al-Qaeda, but to be associated, and that's the word that's used in the NDAA, to provide material support to a group associated with Al-Qaeda is actionable. President Barack Obama, every member, Republican and Democrat, who's voted to fund or send arms to the Syrian resistance has violated the NDAA and should be indefinitely detained.
That's exactly right. We had a perfect example of that just last week. Several rebel factions took over the Christian town of Malula, one of the last places in the world where they speak Aramaic. And even the New York Times now is reporting that the operation to take over the town, which resulted in a lot of dead Christians, a lot of Christians reporting that they were ordered to convert to Islam or die. This was an operation carried out by the Free Syrian Army and by the Al-Qaeda groups, by the Jahabat al-Nusra and the Al-Sham group. So these are two self-styled Al-Qaeda groups, radical jihadist Islamists who want to create an Islamic caliphate. And Al-Qaeda is the word that's used in the NDAA along with associated forces. So there's no question here that the FSA, which is at least one of the groups that we're supporting, was associated with Al-Qaeda in this operation that resulted in the massacre of Christians, the bombing of churches, etc. So you're exactly right. They all should be detained.
Well, you know what? It just occurred to me. It just occurred to me, Alex, something really revolutionary. We've got, yes, Barack Obama, Lindsey Graham, John McCain, etc., on both sides of the so-called political aisle, people with the R after their name and the D after their name, who are sending money and arms to known associates of Al-Qaeda. So they should be liable to be detained indefinitely under the NDAA. But now you've got the fact that the United States Congress and the White House, by sending money, are themselves becoming an associated group with Al-Qaeda.
Oh my goodness.
Who is sending the money to Washington? Who's
That's
sending
true. Oh my goodness.
We all should be indefinitely detained because we keep funding this government. We keep funding the government, and then we complain when they send our money overseas to murder entire towns of Christians. Look, I don't care if they murdered an entire town of Buddhists. But the fact is, if you go in and you murder an entire town, forcing them to convert to Islam or be beheaded, that's not the type of people we should be sending money to. In fact, there is not a type of person we should be sending money to according to the Constitution. Is that right?
That's exactly right. And you know what? Even worse, this isn't even the first time they've done this. They got away with it in Libya. I documented this extensively in my cover story for the New American last year after Gaddafi fell, and I recently read a book that I would recommend to everybody as well. It was The Jihadist Plot of how we helped Al-Qaeda in Libya. And there is no question that the leaders of the Libyan rebellion were people who declared themselves to be Al-Qaeda. When the rebel forces took Tripoli, the guy leading the rebel forces, a gentleman by the name of Ahmed Belhaj, he was the leader of the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group, which in the mid-2000s openly declared its affiliation with Al-Qaeda. They said, we are an affiliate of Al-Qaeda. They were in Iraq. They boasted during the war in Libya that they had just come from Iraq fighting American troops and from Afghanistan. So the argument that was made in this book is that the United States government under Obama has changed sides in the war on terror. So now the Obama administration helped give Libya to Al-Qaeda, and now we're doing the same thing to Syria. So your point is very well taken, Joe, that this has clear implications as far as the NDAA is concerned.
Well, and is there anything more tyrannical, Alex, and listeners / viewers / admirers, is there anything more tyrannical than to have a government who is not bound by its own laws? I can tell you, if I went out and I started a business to sell peach preserves, I was growing my own peaches, canning them, turning them into peach preserves, and selling them, and telling everybody, I'm going to send this money to Al-Qaeda. I'm going to tell you, not only would I have a drone over my house by that afternoon, but I would be arrested. There is not even a question that I would be arrested, but you've got these petty dictators on the Potomac who every day are taking our money, sending it to known agents, known associates of Al-Qaeda, violating the very laws that they hold us accountable to. And not only that, but you've got them exempting themselves from Obamacare. You've got President Obama waiving the arms export law so he can send anti-chemical weapons to the Syrian resistance. Over and over, Alex, the tyranny grows every day with them passing laws that they exempt from themselves from obeying and demand that we obey under the threat of the penalty of indefinite detention.
Yeah, it's come to the point now, and lawlessness is a strong word, but that's what we're living under today. I mean, first of all, the Constitution, they just brazenly ignore it. That's the supreme law of the land. And they pass laws, like you said, that apply to us but not to them. They break their own laws. We're living in a state of lawlessness. Laws don't apply if Congress doesn't want them to apply. The Constitution doesn't seem to apply anymore. So people need to get involved. They need to get on the phone with their congressmen and say, hey, you took an oath to the Constitution. It's enough of this lawlessness. We demand the rule of law in our country. and you took an oath. So did you violate your oath? Somebody needs to be held accountable for this craziness.
And they need to be held accountable on a consistent basis. We need to hold accountable our state legislators who, like I say, shake their fist at Washington, but go ahead and deposit the check that comes in every month. When are we going to have a time when there is someone in some state, enough people that stand up and say, it's enough. You violated the contract. I'm out. It's rescinded. I'm out. You're not supporting the Constitution. Can you imagine, Alex, the glorious breaking of a new day when you've got a state, for the sake of argument, let's say Texas, that passes a law in the state of Texas saying every unconstitutional act of the federal government is prima facie nullified in the state of Texas. We will obey the Constitution. We will remain in the Union insofar as it fulfills the original contract. When the government steps out of that side of that contract, it is prima facie null, void, and of no legal effect. Can you imagine the people voting with their feet, Alex? Texas would not be able to contain those who love liberty moving to Texas, for example.
Yeah, I mean, that needs to happen. It's really, I think, one of the last real avenues that we have here to put the brakes on this madness is using our state legislatures to say, hey, this is the contract. It's very clear. You all took an oath to uphold this contract. If you don't want to live by it, then get out, and we're going to take matters into our own hands. We're going to start nullifying all this lawlessness that's coming out of Washington. And that really is, I think, one of the last best avenues we have to put the brakes on all of this.
Hey, if we don't, we're not our father's children. I can't see Thomas Jefferson standing up for this. Alex Newman, tell people how they can follow you, how they can keep up with the stuff that you're submitting every day.
Go to www.thenewamerican.com. I usually have at least one, sometimes two articles every day, with the exception of maybe the weekend. I write for some other publications as well. If you want to get in touch with me, you can reach me on Facebook. It's my name, Alex Newman, AlexNewman, or my email address is listed at the bottom of most of my articles on The New American. It's anewman@thenewamerican.com. So if you have news tips, comments, whatever, I love to hear from readers, listeners, whatever the case may be. And keep up the good fight, guys. Thanks very much, Joe.
Thank you so much for coming on with us, Alex. Everybody follow this guy. All right. So, are we going to do it? That's the show for today. We've got every Monday, 10 a.m. Eastern. Stay tuned because next week we've got some nationally known heavy hitters who are going to come in here. Maybe one by one, another one will bite the dust. People, let's get this done. Let's take this government back. Restore it to the Constitution. Are we still broadcasting on YouTube?
We had 5 viewers this morning.
Are we off of YouTube now?
We are off the YouTube.
Oh, good.